Stephen Guilbeault didn't just step out of Mark Carney's cabinet, he walked out in protest. The breaking point, seemingly, was this new federal Alberta Memorandum of Understanding that opens the door to a future pipeline, a deal that he reportedly saw as a betrayal of everything he spent his life fighting for. But Guilbeault's exit is more than a cabinet removal. It's the climax of a much longer story. This activist who once climbed the CN Tower to demand climate action, who championed Kyoto's emission targets, only ended up serving in a government that repeatedly missed those very same targets. And just as trust in the climate movement was already wobbling, the SDTC scandal hit, where the Auditor General of Canada found that there were various conflicts of interests inside the very agency meant to fund clean technology, followed by Parliament grinding to a halt to contain the fallout and reduce the amount of documents that were made public as a result of this. Now, for Canadians who genuinely care about the climate, parents who are worried about the world their kids will inherit, well, moments like this make skepticism feel justified, especially when leaders ask the public to absorb higher costs and slower growth for climate goals that the government doesn't itself hit. And we add in Mark Carney's global green finance push, the multiple institution investing organizations, where it's hard to tell if the priority is saving the planet or if the priority is pumping investment flows. You get a movement that's caught in this get long and get loud feedback loop. Now, Guilbeault's resignation isn't just a political story, it's a turning point in a climate conversation that's losing the very people that it needs the most. Guilbeault, who was first the Trudeau Minister for Heritage and then became the Climate and Environmental Minister under the Trudeau government, well, when Mark Carney came to power, he then was given this cabinet role as the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture and Minister responsible for official languages, a Minister of Nature and Parks Canada, as well as his lieutenant in Quebec. Now he's resigned from all of these cabinet positions in this statement that he posted on Twitter. He says that even though it makes sense to prioritize economic growth amidst the changing world order with Donald Trump and the changing trade policies that are happening, he says even despite this difficult economic context, he remains one of those for whom environmental issues must remain front and center and strongly opposes the Memorandum of Understanding between the federal government and the government of Alberta. He says he's against the pipeline for a number of reasons, saying that there hasn't been proper consultation with Indigenous populations or the government of BC, that this would make it harder for Canada to hit its reduction targets, as well as being against the lifting of the tanker ban on the West Coast, which he believes will increase the risk of oil spills. Now, I've heavily criticized Guilbeault, especially back in the time that he was Heritage Minister, with some of the legislation that I think was problematic that he was trying to pass. But this statement is in line with the persona that he has. Before he was in Parliament, he was made famous as a Greenpeace activist, famous for scaling the CN Tower and putting up this sign that says, "Canada and Bush are climate killers." He then became minister in the Trudeau government, which was interesting because despite a lot of big talk about hitting environmental targets. I mean, he hung that poster from the CN Tower to support the Kyoto Protocol, lower targets that were set a long time ago. Well, we failed to hit those, and we've failed to hit every single subsequent target that was set, even while he was environment minister. This chart shows it well. The Kyoto Protocol set very low targets in terms of emissions. Same with the Copenhagen target, the Paris Agreement, and the Adjusted Paris Agreement. And we can see that Canada's actual emissions have been and are projected to go higher and higher. Now, this is a little bit dated data. Let's look at how things have progressed. This chart shows some updated data all the way up until around 2023, but we can see that there hasn't been this dramatic reduction or anywhere near hitting these targets that the policies of the Liberal government, even under Stephen Guilbeault, have set out to hit. A lot of talk about caring about this cause, but not a lot of results. Now, many people may argue about the extent to which this climate concern should be the peak concern of people, or whether or not there are more pressing matters that affect humans more closely, financial issues, ability to have a good quality of life. But there has been some damage done here to this environmentalist movement over the past decade plus. I'm sure there are many people who are genuinely concerned about the climate, the planet, and are worried about the future that they're leaving their children. Now, you might argue about if this issue is as pressing as many make it out to be, but I think most can agree that for most of the average people who are concerned about this, well, it comes from a good place, wanting to preserve the world for future generations. That's a good thing. But when you set these targets and you don't hit them and don't make progress towards hit them, while also pushing policies that could slow economic growth for the sake of hitting those targets, well, it becomes a harder sell that you're really in it for the stewardship of the earth and for our future descendants, and there's not something more to it. Now, highlighting this is the big SDTC scandal, the Sustainable Development Technology Fund that was set up and was subsequently shut down in 2024 amidst Attorney General findings of conflicts of interests leading to the future shutdown of Parliament. Now, this report ultimately led to the toppling of the government, at least in its former iteration. The Attorney General found that there were a number of conflicts of interests in the loans and the grants that were given to various companies, showing that actually they didn't meet qualifications that this fund was supposed to be looking for. And in fact, many of these contracts were given out to people that were connected in one way or another to the government. Now, we eventually saw Parliament become dysfunctional back in late 2024, where the Liberal government wouldn't provide any additional documents regarding the specifics of these findings of the Attorney General. It eventually led to the government dissolving when Trudeau stepped down, Freeland went against him, all of the stuff that happened. It eventually led to the slotting in of Mark Carney as Prime Minister. Now, you don't have to not believe in climate change to have some serious concerns about all of this. And we bring it home to the Prime Minister's former organization that he worked hard to put together, which was called the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, an organization of a bunch of private investment institutions that agreed on a framework saying, okay, we're only going to invest in these areas that support green technology. Now, this is somewhat of a chicken and egg situation. There's a desire to help the climate that's assumed in this framework, where they say, well, we need to drive more investment into these sectors in order to increase the development of green technology. But it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation, because when framed like that, it looks like a desire to help the climate, but in reality, it also funnels billions of dollars into specific sectors that many people may already have a financial stake in and would benefit greatly from if their valuations were increased. It's a chicken and the egg situation. Is the desire to help the climate, or is the desire to promote these investments? Now, of course, it's described in its best terms as a framework that will drive more investment into green technologies. It does do that, but most major institutions have now backed out, and perhaps the people who invested in these green technologies early, well, they've already seen dramatic gains in terms of the valuations of those investments. There's an investing concept called get long and get loud. The idea being that you invest in something and then you want to get really public about saying how great it is to push other people into that investment class. You could do it for things like gold. If someone had a large stockpile of gold, well, then maybe you'd want to have more public PR relations that say, hey, retail investors should be buying a ton of gold. Same goes for climate technologies. If you invest in them early, well, then certainly it would benefit you if more and more financial institutions were forced to invest in these technologies. You're getting long and getting loud. And you can have a plausible deniability of saying, no, well, we want to funnel all this money in so that we actually see improvements for the climate, improvements for the environment that we're all sharing. But you can understand how people start to get skeptical when we look at failure to hit these climate targets, as well as all of the alleged corruption in the way that some of these contracts get handed out in both private funds that are investing in this, but also in the case of the SDTC, public funds that are getting invested in this, but winding up in the pockets of connected insiders. And now we get back to the departure of Stephen Guilbeault, at least in terms of being in the cabinet of the federal Liberal government in Canada. It's a story of more than just this principled man stepping down amidst disagreement in this memorandum of understanding with the Alberta government around this pipeline. It tells a bigger story about the climate change movement and how there's increasing skepticism there. And even when you have an activist in government, well, you're not really hitting these targets that are supposedly the things that we should all be striving for. So it starts to make you reconsider exactly how much we should be targeting those targets, if even when we make major concessions to target those targets, well, we don't see a successful result. I'm curious what all of this makes you think about. Let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It helps me out dramatically and doesn't cost you a dime. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.